My name's Laura Harris. I'm one of the morning anchors over at NBC5 today, and I'm just really thrilled to be here. And I want to introduce the people who we really want to put a spotlight on today. So first, we've got Carl Falconer with Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance.
Right. Thank you.
I'm going to give you your applause here. If there was an audience, they'd clap.
I'm sure. Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
Daniel Roby from Austin Street Center, which is also in Dallas, and then Kimberly Williams, who you see there, beautiful in her red shirt, from Interfaith Family Services, and she's lucky she gets to wear pajama pants.
That's right.
At the bottom. I know when I was working from home and all people could see was this, it was great. It was so great. Okay, but on a serious note, we are here to talk about homelessness in Dallas, but it's also an issue all across this country, North Texas specifically. Daniel, we got a chance to talk a little bit earlier this week about it. Just kind of tell people who might be tuning in for the first time and saying, I didn't know it was that big of a deal, but it is a big deal and it's getting worse.
It really is. And first off, let me thank you, Laura, for being here. Huge fan of you and NBC, and obviously the Client Foundation and Phillips Foundation and RealityCheckIt. You guys have done an amazing job of being ambassadors for the cause of homelessness, and we appreciate it. A couple of things I would say about COVID-19 specifically is people who are homeless are twice as likely than the average individual to be hospitalized, to require critical care, and even to die of COVID-19. And so it's certainly important that we make sure that we do everything we can to promote safety for everyone experiencing homelessness, as well as we make sure that we transition people into a permanent place to call home as quickly and as permanently as we can, as fast as we can, because the better we do that, the faster we do that, then the safer that they are, and the safer that we all are, frankly. And so I'm really proud of how all of the different partners have responded to COVID-19, because frankly, we haven't seen the dramatic increase of cases among the homeless that we initially feared when this crisis really first, came onto the scene, here in Dallas.
Yeah, because Carl, one of the things that I have noticed is for everybody out there, no one was able to prepare for this, right?
That's correct.
Most of us have never lived through a pandemic. So if you've never lived through it, but I could easily go to my house and socially distance and be safe. Sure. That's not the case for people who are homeless and those trying to help them.
No, absolutely not. Now, when you say that we weren't prepared in the homeless response system, that's not necessarily true. The beautiful thing about Daniel and other providers in our homeless response system is that we prepare for this every day. Because homeless people are more susceptible to diseases, communicable diseases, tuberculosis, even the flu, things like that. Most of our providers in the homeless response system have done a really, really good job of mitigating any of the COVID-19 response to homeless individuals, because they already had a lot of these things in place. They already had a lot of precautions in place around making sure that people didn't get sick, making sure they didn't spread the disease, making sure they didn't do these things. Now, have we had to go to another level? Yes, absolutely. But the reality is that in most cases for our providers, they've really just kind of stepped up what they were already doing. I have some specific numbers in terms of the increase that we've seen for COVID-19. Homelessness is up by about 165 people per month across our system. And our prevention services have served 51 more people each month during the time of COVID. But believe me, as Daniel said, it could have been a whole lot worse, and it could still be a whole lot worse if not for the tremendous homeless providers we have in our system. They're really doing a great job. And like I said, a lot of them already had a lot of things in place that were not necessarily for COVID-19, but for similar types of diseases and things like that.
Right. Kimberly, can you kind of speak to what Interfaith Family Services is also doing in the community right now?
Sure. So Interfaith Family Services focuses on helping families that are homeless and those that are at risk for homelessness. And in particular, single mothers. About 96% of the families that we serve consist of single mothers. And our core client are the working poor. And many of the working poor families that we serve would be classified as essential workers. So what we have seen during the pandemic is when these single moms who are either essential workers or suddenly find themselves needing to virtually train their kids, or suddenly in need of childcare when childcare facilities were closing down, or even laid off. We saw a 10 to 12 times in some month increase in inquiries for support. So we were seeing 300 to 400 calls a month for people that were needing housing or rent or utility assistance at the height of the pandemic. So what we do is focus on providing wraparound services for those families. We provide housing in our apartments for homeless families, and we also provide 0 to 18 childcare and after school care for their kiddos. So one of the things that we have found is now more than ever, single mothers in Dallas that are working poor and working class really need support.
Yeah, Kimberly brings up a good point here. I know I have said this in the past, but yeah, usually any financial advisor will tell you, make sure you've got about 6 to 8 months of, income saved, right? Because anything could happen and you don't have money, you don't have your income coming in. So that's how you're going to pay your bills. But then COVID-19 happened. And some people lost their jobs the very next day. I mean, bars had to shut down, restaurants had to shut down. And so what Kimberly's talking about here, people needing that immediate help. But gentlemen, what have you also seen? Because listen, I could have 6 months saved. We're past 6 months now. So I still might be in a situation where I'm coming up on homelessness. So this could happen to any one of us.
It could. And I would say that most people can't even afford, a $400 crisis. We say at Austin Street Center that is primarily focused on individuals experiencing homelessness, that poverty or some type of financial need, plus a crisis of some kind, minus a social support structure that's adequate, is really what makes homelessness. And what I would say in this situation is when a crisis is so big, then it doesn't take very much financial need. And it doesn't take a very weak social support structure for someone to fall in homelessness. And what I'm most concerned about right now is really a trifecta of concerns. Because right now what we're looking at is a cancellation of moratoriums on evictions, combined with inclement weather, where cold weather is just around the corner. And combined with that, we also have the COVID-19 crisis. So all these things combined is we've responded pretty well right now with our existing providers and the resources that have come our way. But I'm really concerned about what happens 6 months from now, what happens, when we get to January, because I think we have a tidal wave coming for us that we may not be prepared for. So we've done a great job, but we still need a lot of help to get where we need to be due to the things that may come our way here in the coming months.
What are some of those things that are happening, Carl?
Yeah, I think Kimberly and also Daniel pointed it out. I think the people that we're most worried about right now that we've been seeing coming into the homeless response system that we had not normally been seeing are people kind of on that fringe. Is people who are working, the working poor, people who are working, who are making their paychecks from week to week work for them. But then when employment went away, that really changed the entire focus of it. Also, people who are staying in hotels and in temporary types of situation, because the eviction moratorium did not apply to any of those individuals. So I know the hotel industry has taken a big hit through COVID-19. And one of the reasons, honestly, is because a lot of our people were using hotels as a place to stay. And they were working and they were doing fine. They were able to pay week to week or month to month at the hotel. But once that employment dried up, it really caused a big problem there. So I think that was one of the biggest issues that we had have had with COVID-19 is work, is we have to get people back to work and have employment for them.
Yeah, and a new jobs report came out today, even more people asking for unemployment, filing for unemployment. But I also want to point out that there are people now getting back on their feet.
Sure. That's right.
always want to find a silver lining here, people getting back on their feet. But then there becomes a different problem. Okay, so now I can get out of the shelter, I can get out of that where I am right now. But now they've got to get identification. They've got to get all these things going so that they can get a new apartment. And then that becomes a whole different problem. So Kimberly, I'll start with you. What are those issues that people are seeing as well?
Well, I think there's kind of a combination of things. Like you said, there's the need for childcare, in working poor families in particular. When schools reach capacity, we just had where, when school started back in Dallas, we were able to send the children in our children's program back to the campus. And then we found out 2 weeks later that the school had reached its capacity. So then new children that came into the program, we had to do virtual learning here at Interfaith because their parents were working. And so that's a big problem. What happens when I work at a grocery store, the school where my child goes reaches capacity, or like what happened with one of our schools, there were cases of COVID in a certain grade. And so that child had to come back home. So now what do? I need this job, this hourly job on top of that to pay the bills and pay the rent, but my child is now at home with me and I can't leave them at home by themselves. So childcare is a really big issue, and it was an issue before COVID. Of all of the families that qualify for childcare subsidies in Texas, only 10% of those families actually received it because there wasn't adequate childcare. So that's really a major issue right now. Even when I get back to work, if schools aren't in session and there's not adequate childcare or subsidy so that I can maybe have some support so I can send my child to childcare, then I can't really take the job to get back on my feet, or I may lose the job I have because I have to be at home with my children.
Wow.
Yeah, can I add something to that?
Please do. I mean, just opening, I mean, that's why we're all here today, but just opening our eyes to some things that a lot of people have never had to experience.
Well, I just wanted to say that that's absolutely true, that Dallas has fared a lot better than other cities. I think the most recent jobs report that I saw was that there's 131,000 jobs less than this time last year in the Dallas area, which is a lot better than we expected it to be, given the fact that we've had this massive, pandemic across the nation. At Austin Street, some of the things that we're challenged with is we had an individual who had done a great job. They worked their tail off. They got this job. They were doing well. They were promoted to a supervisor position. When their employer found out they were staying in a homeless shelter, their hours were reduced because the employer was concerned that they were going to bring COVID-19 into the workplace. So we had to send a letter to the employer stating the number of cases that Austin Street Center had experienced, which at that time in their residential area were none, in order to be able to give the employer confidence that they could increase their hours again. And so it's those type of things that the average individual doesn't experience, that we see someone who's homeless, we need to make sure we change our mindset. These people are amazing. Everyone who experiences homelessness, I have amazing respect for. People who experience homelessness are resilient. They are courageous. And I have so much admiration and respect for every person who goes through that trial, because they are just incredible people that overcome enormous challenges that most individuals don't face. And so we should give them that kind of respect that they really deserve for the things that they've overcome, and not look down on people for the circumstances that they experience.
Can we underscore
Yeah,
people?
absolutely.
They are people.
Yeah. They're human beings. And just to add to what Kimberly and Danielle have said as well, across the system, what we're seeing is that a lot of the other things that we take for granted, libraries and community centers and government government positions or government offices being closed, have really hindered people to be able to move out of homelessness. Try moving into an apartment without an identification. Try moving into an apartment without a social security card. But right now we've got waits of 2 and 3 months for people to get these identifying documents that they need to be able to move into housing. So any kind of disruption in even those smallest things really throws off people being able to get themselves back on their feet. Like I said, employment, the same thing. Trying to have identification to make sure that you get employed. Those are the big things that we're looking at across the system as well.
Yeah, all of us have seen something different happen each and every day, each and every week. You know, and when the pandemic first started, in my mind, March 20th was the first day that I had to start working from home. And I just knew, oh my God, this is gonna, I'm not worried. We'll do this for about 2 weeks, and then we're going back to the station. And then August came, and it was like my hair was on fire because I hadn't been at work. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really, and cases are going up. I mean, they're a little bit steady now in North Texas, but important to note that cases are going up. So I'm only worried about me, guys. I'm only worried about me and my house. You all are worried about so many other people, and not only their livelihoods, but their lives depend on the service that you're giving. So how are you pivoting and changing every day when you see this?
Yeah, I think the point that Daniel made when we first started talking about the social support network is a really big piece of this, is that that's what we're trying to recreate for that population of individuals. Is we're trying to create that social support network. So trying to do that when you're not face to face, or you have technology issues, or you have to worry about social distancing, or even wearing a mask with someone that you're trying to interact with, makes it a lot more difficult to do that. And so those are some of the challenges that we've really had to work around and find workarounds for in our business. Because our business, for the most part, when you're trying to create that social network for homeless individuals or people trying to get back on their feet, that's a face-to-face thing. We take pride in that being a face-to-face thing. We're trying to see them, as you said, as human beings, as individuals, and we're trying to work with them as closely as we can to let them know that they have value, that we love them, that we care about them. It's really difficult to do that socially distanced. It's really difficult to do that through technology. Those are some of the pivots that we've had to make, particularly in trying to create that social system for them.
Kimberly, you talked about families, specifically single moms. Hey, when I'm a kid, I used to love to hug my mom. I loved hugging my teachers. I can remember all of that. It was just this emotional filling of my cup to be able to do that. I don't remember the last time I hugged a human being.
Right.
And I'm an adult and I know that. So how are you all providing that emotional support for these children who they can't get it the way they used to?
Well, it's pretty amazing. You know, all of us take turns. We have two buildings that are right adjacent to each other, an adult education facility and then our 0 to 18 childcare facility. And all of us take turns going over there masked up just to watch the kids because they give us so much joy. It's like they have no idea what's going on, and most of them really don't care, especially the young ones. But what we do is we have to make sure that everything is completely safe and sanitized on the hour. Our classrooms are socially distanced, so the kids aren't allowed to interact. So if you're in the infant room, you stay there. And for our after school program, if you're in the kindergarten room, you stay there. And you interact with their teachers. We make sure that our teachers wear masks and wear shields. And so it's a different experience, but what we're finding is that kids are connecting with each other in those smaller groups, and they are developing relationships with each other in a different way because they have this connection. And they also long to connect. So we're seeing them develop socially, and we're trying to take that opportunity to build kind of the social connection with the kids. But, you know, we're doing our best to keep things normal. The challenge for us is making sure that we are continue to be safe, continue to exercise social distancing, continue to disinfect daily, continue to have PPE. Just the cost of this daily disinfecting and even fogging the building is what we do too, once per month, increased our annual expenses by about $75,000. So we weren't anticipating that, but we do that so that there can be that safe interaction with our kids because they need it. And we see that for their mental health and for their continued development, there has to be some contact. We just have to do it safely. And fortunately, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've had 0 incidents of COVID-19 here at Interfaith. So it's working, but it's awfully expensive, but it's working. And we're glad to be able to provide a safe haven for those kids.
and prayers to continue to have that. That is an awesome track record to be able to say you've been able to do that. But you bring up a great point, Kimberly, and I'm going to ask you gentlemen, 75 grand additional so that she can make sure they can make sure that everything is clean for these kids. I mean, how are you all keeping up with that?
From an operational perspective, it has been overwhelmingly challenging. I mean, I have been amazed and impressed about how the community has responded to the need, but we've had to bring on-site rapid testing, just to ensure, in a congregate setting shelter that we know that the folks that we have, are infection-free and that we don't have a virus of concern, due to COVID-19. We've also changed from an overnight shelter primarily to a 24/7 hour operation so that we have twice as many people at the Austin Street Center during the day than we used to have before COVID-19. Because now when people come to Austin Street, they stay there, they're working the program, they're engaging their case manager, they're engaging in our day center services, and they're not just there for the night and then leave during the day and go about their business, accessing other facilities. And so it's definitely been a huge pivot. And it's also been an adjustment because we're transitioning to acquire about 150 apartment units to try to make sure that we're pulling this lever to make sure that people have a permanent solution to their homelessness, and we're not just providing emergency shelter. So the costs have been significant, but I think what we'll find in the long term is that we're engaging in the final solution for these individuals.
Not just giving them a
Band-Aid.
I
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point that Daniel brings up is we have seen the cost increase for all of the providers that we work with. I think staffing is a big thing that has added additionally. You have to have more staff. If you're going to do things differently, if you're going to clean the surfaces, if you're going to make sure that you have the interactions you want to have, you're going to need more staff. We've seen more staff that they've had to add, more personal protective equipment, obviously, cleaning equipment, things like that. But it's also about balancing that long-term and short-term. Yes, we're in the middle of a crisis. Yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we want to make sure that day to day, everybody is safe and everybody is okay. But we also want to make sure that we're still moving people to housing, that we're getting people on, like Daniel said, to their home, to a place where they can actually social distance themselves. Like you were talking about earlier, where you can go and be safe yourself. You can take care of yourself and be safe. That's what we want for all of the homeless individuals that are in our system. And so it's balancing out those two things and making sure that we're using dollars effectively for the short term and using dollars effectively for the long term to have a really, really good, really significant impact on homelessness and getting people into housing. Because I think one thing that, if there's one thing COVID-19 has taught us, it's better for our community if people are in their homes. And that is something that we want to drive home with people, is to let them know that everyone needs a home, because home is not just four walls anymore. It's healthcare. Home is healthcare for us, and it's healthcare for the community. And so we want to make sure that we're getting people into houses.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And one thing that you three have done such a good job of is not labeling people as homeless. Because, one of the things that I try to make sure that when we're on the air, they're not homeless people. They're people who are homeless, because this is not a label that they're given, because you all are making sure that they don't keep that label. This is just the situation that they're in right now, but it's not a label. And so how are you all specifically helping these people get a seat at the table? When it comes past this point and it's like, okay, you're able to get on your own now, but just making sure that they still have a seat at the table, they can still move on and be a productive member of society and not come back.
One of Austin Street's core values is empowerment. And I think it's important to try to incorporate that in everything that you do. We have a number of town halls that we do every week just to make sure that we're engaging everyone who is at Austin Street in all of our programming. My favorite part of every day is, regardless of what happened during the day when we're trying to stress out about funding and trying to make sure that we can keep open and get all the services that we need, regardless of what happened, and all the politics of the day, I spend the last hour of the day inside the shelter, talking to our clients and trying to figure out what do they need, what do we need to change, how do we need to do things different and better so that we make sure that we have the right focus. And that's my favorite part of the day. And I think it's that engagement that really keeps your compass in the right focus. And I like how you talk about specifically saying, people and not homeless person. The way I like to think about it is we don't classify any other person based upon their living condition. I don't say one person apartment dweller or housing owner,
right,
or
but it's true.
It's a strange thing to say.
That's right.
But we say homeless person as if it's your identity, as if it's who you are. And so just going through that mental shift of saying someone who's flying a sign on the street corner, they're not a homeless person, they're just a person and they just don't have a home right now.
Don't have a place to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, is making sure that we make that shift and making sure that we understand, where we're going with that, and making sure that people see the people as people first. I think that's the biggest thing. In across our homeless response system, the two ways that we really try and give a voice to people who have experienced homelessness or are experiencing homelessness is, number one, on our board. We have two positions actually that we're developing for individuals who have lived experience, who have been homeless previously, to sit on our board and actually help us make those policy decisions. And they are invaluable. When we hear them speak at our board meetings, it's like the entire room lights up listening to people who have actually experienced this, which is fantastic. The other part that we have is we actually have what we call an Alliance Homeless Forum, which is a forum for individuals with lived experience to get together and talk about their issues among themselves. We have staff there from Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance who then takes all of that information that they're sharing, very similar to what Daniel was talking about, is taking that information back and figuring out how we plug that into our homeless response system and get the most value out of it. Because you're right, there's nobody that is better at knowing what their situation is than the people who are actually living it right now.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Kimberly, what would you say with that?
So for us, it's really about allowing our families to tell their story as much as possible. We too have a seat on our board and have for several years for our graduates, but we always highlight our family stories in their own words. We have a page on our website dedicated to videos for these stories, because here's what a lot of people don't know. One of the largest demographics of the homeless population consists of homeless families. The largest segment of the poor in Dallas consists of the working poor. So what happens is a lot of times people assume that just because a person is working at Whole Foods that they have a place to stay, and that's not the case. Or just because a person is delivering their Amazon packet that they have a place to stay, and that's not always the case. Because we've had individuals in both instances come through interfaith, and as well as we've had teachers come through interfaith and a nurse come through interfaith that dealt with a divorce and found herself homeless. So it's important for us to allow our families to tell their stories in their own words. And so that when we're engaging and interacting with people every day, we need to start thinking about what's behind that smile. We need to start thinking about now that we're coming to value essential workers, we need to ask ourselves, are those essential workers being paid a livable wage? Because that's going to help them stay in their home. Do we have adequate childcare? Because that's going to help them stay on their jobs. So by having them tell their stories, it humanizes this very important group of people, but also allows our community to know how they can come alongside these families and these individuals to provide support. So that's really the biggest thing. I always feel like there's nothing more powerful than allowing other people to hear from the folks that are impacted with homelessness, but also empowered to overcome it.
Yeah. One thing I have said about 2020 is we've seen the best in people. I have seen people doing things that they would have never done for other people. And it's just like, you get kind of this nudge that I have the ability to help someone else, so I should.
Right.
But I also think it has kind of gotten people in this bubble where they're being selfish, where, okay, I'm going to be fine. My family's fine. That's all I'm worried about. Whereas in your business, you have to worry about everybody else who's coming through your doors to ensure that they're going to be okay. How do you do that? And I'm not just talking about the people you help every day, but you all are truly incredible, mentally and emotionally. This is a lot.
You know, if I could just jump in, like, I think what's crazy, and I'm sure my fellow panelists would agree, we find inspiration and motivation from our families. You know, seeing people get up day after day and fight to survive and thrive and overcome, really, it has the opposite effect of what most people would think. It reminds me that there's more in me to give, and that whatever challenge I face, I have the resilience to overcome it. And so I think that's the other thing that the community is missing out on when we don't engage people that are homeless. We are missing out on amazing stories of survival and empowerment. So it actually, most days, does the opposite. Some days I get frustrated that the resources aren't adequate, but most days I'm inspired that people are continuing to fight and to thrive despite insurmountable obstacles.
You know, I would like to echo what Kimberly said. And first off, I mean, I gotta say, I mean, I got some heroes here that I really look up to. And so I love just being here, sitting and talking with you guys. I was sitting and talking with one of our residents, one of our clients the other day, and he was sharing his story with me. And he had, you know, been in prison for 10 years for a drug offense, and then had gotten out, and he'd gone through an addiction recovery program, a faith-related program, and he had done great and done everything he was supposed to do. And his apartment caught on fire, and he had to leave. And so he was kind of on his own for the first time. And so I was seeing his determination. He was asking me, he's like, I'm not going to go back. You know, what AA material do you have? Do you have a Bible? You know, what I want your help. Can you help me get a job? And he was just determined to make it. And his inspiration, his determination makes it easy for when you're getting up every day, you know, to play your small role, you know, in the overall effort. And even more so, or along with that, is when my 14-year-old gets up and says, hey, Dad, you know, the $10 from mowing the lawn, you know, last week, here, go ahead and take that. And if you'll give that to Austin Street, that's what I want to do with that. And those type of things make me be like, you know, what else can I do? Because surely there's more than what I'm giving.
Yeah, I'll echo what Kimberly and Daniel have said as well. It's the people we run into. I mean, I learned that early in my career when I started doing outreach, when I first started working in this business. And in fact, you know, against some of the better wishes of my staff, sometimes I still go out and I do outreach regularly. I go out on the streets and I interact with people and I talk with people. I don't go out as the CEO of MDHA. I go out as Carl, a human being who's trying to connect with other human beings, because I need that feedback. I need that energy. I need them to fill me with that inspiration so that I can keep focused on what we're trying to do here, which is to get them all into housing. And so they really do feed you. They really do give you that energy. I mean, there are certainly days that we have disappointments. There are certainly days that we feel pain and the people we're dealing with have pain. But I heard someone say one time, whenever you deal with human beings, you're going to experience pain and disappointment. The question you have to ask yourself is it worth it? Every single day it's worth it. Every single day it's worth it. And again, to Daniel's point, I think the younger generation feeds us as well. The younger generation has inspired me tremendously. I have a young daughter as well. And the things that she comes up with and the things she says and the things she wants to do, and just looking through her eyes to see her wanting to have a better world for all of us is just inspiration to me. And it keeps me moving forward, and it keeps me saying, I've got to keep going. If not for myself, but for all the people that are still out there and for the next generation coming up, because they are really on fire. The next generation is, and it's fantastic to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen it in the last couple of months. Just
Mm-hmm.
we do this, we do like just a little segment on our show called Something Good. And
Mm-hmm.
every day we have to tell a story about somebody doing something good. Listen, more often than not, it's a kid.
Yeah.
It's a kid. We did a story about a 9-year-old who's trying to raise enough money and food to be able to put together 100,000 meals for people in need.
Yeah.
He's 9.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm 35 and I'm just over here like,
And
all right, I guess I got to see
Exactly.
people helping people. You love
That's
to
right.
see it.
Absolutely.
But that's a great point, though. So all of us are here for a reason. We wanted to know more. So what do we do? What can we do to get involved? What can we do to get engaged? Because whether it's time, talent, or treasure, there has to be something that you all are asking the community for.
Well, there certainly is. So you open the door wide. I cannot walk through it. Let me start by saying, I call them ambassadors. We need people that really champion the cause for us. It's so easy to fall into the stigma, but I do think now more than ever before, people recognize that homelessness is not too far away for anybody. And I think COVID-19 has brought that to reality for everyone. And so I would say whether it's social media, and perhaps even more importantly is call your city council person and say, hey, I'm not not in my backyard kind of person, and I would support anything that you could do in our city council district, that was, helping to promote making sure that people who experience homelessness have a place to stay. What can I do to support that? Of course, we need your support financially. We need your in-kind donations. It's inclement weather season. So, blankets and sheets and all those things can still be dropped off at Austin Street, which is at 2929 Hickory Street in Dallas, Texas, 75226. And you can always go to all of our websites, which are great places as well, to be able to find ways to support. So help to educate your neighbors, your family members, and there are still opportunities to volunteer. So just because COVID exists doesn't mean that all volunteer opportunities are shut. So you could reach out and find out ways to do that as well.
Yeah, for MDHA, if you want to invest your time, your talent, your resources, certainly you can go to our MDHA website, and there is hold on, let me see if I have it on here. There is Help MDHA End Homelessness page on that website. So if you go to our website, you can certainly invest time and energy with us there. There, if you'll sign up, if you go to our website, you can sign up for newsletters so that you can be involved and you can hear what's going on in the community. We put out newsletters about our homeless response system and what's happening in our homeless response system. So staying involved and staying energized. And then, as Daniel said, talking to your city councilman, your commissioners, people like that about housing, about affordable housing. But one specific thing that they can talk about now is eviction data, is trying to get more eviction data. As Daniel said, we're looking forward and we're predicting that there's going to be this big wave of evictions coming in once the moratorium ends. But the reality is right now, we don't have really good eviction data. The problem is, particularly in Dallas County right now, we're using antiquated technology. And I think they're trying to work on that, but they could certainly use a nudge from the community to really try and build up that technology because we don't know. And that's the worst part. The worst part of us trying to help individuals when we don't know what's coming or we can't see what's coming. So really, we really need that eviction data, and we need it to be real time, and we need it to be accurate so that we can plan and prepare for what's on the horizon.
I would agree with what you all have said, as well as, we at Interfaith, we have the COVID-19 Affected Workers Fund, where we provide rent and utility assistance to people who need need that type of support during COVID-19. But the other thing that we're seeing is our children in particular are needing things like winter coats. And then we are also getting ready to launch our annual toy drive. One of the things that we hope to do is to make sure that the magic of Christmas is still something that our kiddos can look forward to. So that's a really exciting thing that we're looking forward to doing, is having our annual Christmas store the way that we normally do, and parents get to shop for toys and pajamas and socks for their kiddos. So we eliminate that expense while making sure that the magic of Christmas continues to be a part of our wonderful kids' lives. So those are really things that anyone could do. You could help us bridge the gap when there's a need for rent and utility assistance. You can provide warmth through clothing or coats, or even joy through toys. So those are the immediate ways that we could get and use your help.
Yeah, and just because I think you said this earlier, but just because you don't see the problem doesn't mean that the problem is not there. So maybe also word of mouth. Yes. Now that we've all heard the stories and we're all here together because there's a reason why we're here, because we care. So maybe just start that conversation with other people in the community who we know have the resources to help.
Absolutely. Most people who are homeless don't ask anyone for help. They're not people who are panhandling. You don't see them out there. And so often we don't drive to places where we may see someone who's experiencing homelessness. We go, to our jobs, or right now jobs may be at home. Yeah. And so, we're going to the grocery store and we're going home, and that's what our life is looking like. So, out of sight, out of mind. And, we have an opportunity to engage here. So join social media, and find out ways to get educated on it.
Yeah, social media, I tell you, it's, when you see young people on it, sometimes it is a bit of a burden. But I do find, especially where we are right now, it's a great way to keep connected. Just with RealityCheckIt, I've just been going through some of their social feeds, and it's incredible, all of the resources they're just throwing out there to you. Hey, if you're sitting on your couch and you got $5 and you don't want to eat a burger today, donate it. It's incredible the little thing that each one of us can do to make a difference.
Absolutely. And a lot of the education and awareness, and again, it comes full circle, that whole idea we talked about at the beginning, and everybody has talked about here, is these are human beings and they're part of our community, and really making sure that we understand that we see them as human beings first is really the key to us being able to solve this problem within our community.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how often $5 has made the difference to getting somebody out of an emergency shelter and into a permanent home.
Absolutely.
$5.
Yeah.
That in itself is enough for us to just try to help, or at least get other people to. So I think we've concluded this part. So we're going to do some Q&A. How about that? This is my favorite thing, is to ask people questions. And I know I've been doing that for the last hour, but I got more questions. So here we go with my questions. And anybody can answer this. It doesn't matter, but they're questions that probably people out there are asking themselves as they're kind of listening to things that are being said here. So first things first, and I love this question because I think the words are they're interchanged too much, and B, people need to understand the difference. So are panhandlers always homeless?
No.
No, the answer is no.
No is the answer to that. No. Statistics that I've seen across the country is somewhere usually between 20 and 25% of the people that are panhandling are homeless during that time. Most of the people that are panhandling, honestly, just are not homeless. What they are is they're entrepreneurs. They're people who are looking to make money. Now, again, I'm not saying that they don't have a right to free speech, or they don't have a right to, ask for people for money if that's what they want. But the reality is that most of the people that are doing that, they don't need the money, and it's not helping them to move to where they need to go, even if they are homeless. Most homeless people that I've talked to who have actually been out panhandling, what they say is, I'll panhandle if I absolutely have to. If there's no other alternative that I have, I will go panhandle. I'll get a little bit of change, and then I'll go get me some food, and then I'll be done with it. But I will not panhandle on a regular basis. That won't be something I'm doing.
Because it's about teaching a man to fish, or woman, or,
I've seen studies as low as 3% and as high as 40% in different communities. But regardless, it's the same. Most people who are homeless are not asking you for money.
Wow. How big of an issue is mental illness addiction within the homeless community and the demographic? And I ask this question very lightly because anybody can deal with a mental health issue. You don't have to be homeless to have a mental health issue. But I can only imagine how it's emphasized if I don't have a safe place to go to at the end of my day.
Yeah, absolutely. Starting with the system, across the system, generally what we see nationally, and it trends pretty close here. It's about 25% people that have a diagnosis of a serious mental illness. Now, if you're adding in other diagnoses such as depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or things like that, then it can get up as high as 80 and 85% of the people that we deal with. But going through homelessness, in fact, is a traumatic event. And honestly, who wouldn't be depressed if you're going through homelessness? So again, about 25% is serious and persistent mental illness, mixed with substance abuse that's in there as well. Substance abuse usually is a little bit higher if you hold it by itself, about 33%. But then you're starting to talk about, which came first. Are you depressed and you're trying to use drugs and alcohol to self-medicate? A lot of our homeless individuals that we talk to across the system, honestly, one of the biggest reasons why they're using drugs or alcohol is to get to sleep at night. Honestly, is just to be able to take a little bit of a respite from their life in the form of sleep, just at night to be able to do so, which is why when they're at a shelter or they're working with programs, it's a whole lot easier for them to be able to navigate through the system, takes a lot of that stress off. And that's the idea of trying to get people connected to those services and things.
Kimberly, I mean, you talk about somebody being homeless for the time being, but also what you were talking about earlier, maybe somebody's dealing with a divorce or a death in the family, or I had to move out because there was a fire. I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's something. The stress factor is always an issue. That's why we require families coming into our transitional housing program to have 4 mandatory counseling sessions. And the reason for that is because a lot of times you're under stress, and like you were saying, you're depressed and don't know it. The other thing that's really interesting is the toll that homelessness and poverty in general takes on a child's mental health. Children absorb what's going on in the house. So when they see mom stressed, or they hear the phone ring regarding a bill, or they see mom counting out change to go get food, they're very much aware of that. And they begin to take on the pressure of those situations as well. And some kids even blame themselves. So we also have our children go through behavioral and social and emotional assessments when they come into interfaith. And, we see children also experiencing depression as a result of the stress and the pressure that they've seen their parents undergo. So it's a real issue. And so think about how that plays out when that child then goes to school. You're worried about mom or dad's ability to make ends meet. You're worried about whether or not the lights are going to be on when you get home, or even if you're going to be evicted because you noticed the eviction notice on the kitchen table, and you're also supposed to participate in school or even do so virtually. So it's one of those things where it definitely plays a role, and we need to be mindful of the need to provide those mental health resources to homeless families and individuals.
Daniel, something I learned from you earlier this week when I talked to you is that there are different types of homelessness. Different types. There are people who were veterans and for whatever reason they were unable to get work or that sort of thing. It's just different levels and different types of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I look at that is that every person's situation is different. We think about homelessness as if, it's a single group of people that have the same circumstances and situation. And so people ask me all the time, what's the solution? And certainly, we know that the common circumstances, they need a home. But if you're getting into the specifics, everyone's circumstance is different. The different vulnerabilities are different. The different challenges and obstacles are different. At Austin Street, I've met people that have had PhDs and people that have experienced multiple generations of poverty. People that are in their 70s and 80s, and people that are 18. And so the circumstances are different for every person. And so what's important for us, what we do is try to make sure that we meet with each individual person. When they first come to Austin Street, we spend 45 minutes trying to understand what their story is, and then try to figure out what's the unique pathway for them. There's some commonalities for sure with identification and income and making sure that we've got a housing plan. But outside of that, we're going to need to support them in a unique way for them, and try to find that individualized approach is really important.
October is known as, I know we're not in October now, but we just got out of October, and it's known as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And oftentimes when we do stories with women and sometimes men who have been survivors of domestic violence, you find that that is the reason why they don't have a place to live. Mm-hmm. So what's the correlation here in DFW for that?
It's the same thing. It's like Daniel said, it can be varied, but I think that the biggest thing that we're seeing with domestic violence in terms of homelessness is that one of the things that the person who is committing the domestic violence against the victim will do is they will cut them off, is they'll take away that support network for them. And so that's one of the things that makes it really difficult during COVID-19, is that naturally we're cutting ourselves off from a lot of normal contact that we would have with individuals. And that makes it twice as difficult for someone who is experiencing domestic violence, because not only are they playing right into what the perpetrator's situation is, or what the perpetrator is trying to do to the victim, but a lot of people that would normally reach out to them are not normally reaching out to them. So one of the things that we've encouraged people to do around things like domestic violence is just check in with people, make sure that they're okay, make sure you keep that contact with them. My wife has a weekly call that she does with friends of ours who still live back in Jacksonville, where we came from. But they keep that weekly call going because they're doing a check-in with each other. They're making sure that they're okay. They're making sure they're all right. And for domestic violence victims, that's the way to help them get out of their situation, is by making sure that they have some kind of lifeline. They have some access to be able to get to another support network that can help them.
And Kimberly, I know you also, what you all are doing at Interfaith, that has to be one of the things that you all see and have to help with.
Sure. So we definitely see that. And it's one of the things like that, creates an immediate, maybe homelessness situation for a family when the spouse decides to leave or leave with the children. Now with Interfaith, we partner with other organizations like Genesis and Family Place to make sure that families first are safe. And then after they transition out of those programs, then often we'll take them once they've, taken care of the legal aspects of the program, of their situation, so that we're assured that they won't have any problems with us, with their spouse coming or looking for them or whatever. But it's a major issue, and the economic impact of maybe being dependent on a spouse and then suddenly finding yourself, having to put a resume together, pay bills, do all of these things while dealing with the trauma of being abused is a whole lot. So often that takes a collaborative effort from multiple partners in the Dallas community. Fortunately, we have a great network of partners and so many great organizations here in Dallas that we can partner with each other and do our part to help. But it's definitely an issue.
Well, it is 11 o'clock, so that means it is time for us to wrap this up. But before we do that, I want each of our panelists to just give us maybe about 2 minutes of your final remarks, not only what you're asking the community for, but the call for action here. And Kimberly, I'll start with you.
So I just want to encourage people to remember, when you're engaging folks, I think one of the things that we need more than anything right now is just a renewed commitment to kindness. When you're interacting with people on the streets, especially since you can't often see their smile, or you're interacting with people at the store, or someone's delivering your package, remember to be kind and remember to pay attention to their situation. Because people are dealing with job loss, they're dealing with all type of stress. And when they're feeling external pressure, unnecessary external pressure, it only makes things worse. So we've already talked to you about how to give and do all of that. So I'll leave you to that. But just if I could have like a second on my soapbox, it would just say, be nice. We need that, and our families need that, and our kids need to see more of it. So that's all for me.
What a novel idea. Be nice to people. Pretty sure my grandmother taught me that. Why can't people figure this out? My goodness. Carl, what about you?
Obviously, as I said, if you want to invest your time and talent and energy, go to our website, mdhadallas.org, and get involved there. But for us, obviously, there's really a couple of things that we really want to echo back to everybody. And we've talked about this before, is make yourself aware. Try to educate yourself on what's happening, volunteer and talk to people who know what's going on in your community around homelessness and what the solutions are and what can be done and what needs to be done. And then, also advocate for more affordable housing. You certainly want to advocate for more affordable housing across the spectrum, because we certainly need more affordable housing. But then we also, I just want people to be aware that we have to realize that a home has become, because of COVID-19, more than just a place where you hang your hat. It's become employment. It's become healthcare. It's become childcare. It's become all of these different things for us. And we really have to ask yourself as a community member, is it really okay that we still have people who are without homes? And if your answer is no, then we need to do something together. But we also need to understand that we can solve this. We can solve homelessness. We have answers. We know we have great providers that you've talked with here. We have people who know how to do this. We just have to have the community will to move this forward and be able to solve this problem for our community.
Well, I guess I would say a few things. Maybe first off, thank you to all of you who have allowed us to be here today. What a joy to get to be able to share about the work, that we're a part of. At Austin Street, I'm just so incredibly blessed with such an amazing team of people. This past month in October, we've been able to move 30 people out of homelessness and into a permanent home. And it's such an amazing, hardworking group of folks that make that happen. And thank you to everyone out there that supports us, that helps to make that happen. Because without the community, there's no way that would exist. So, there's so much more than just emergency sheltering that's happening. There's programs for veterans. There's support structures. There's mental health clinics and chapel services, and it just takes a village and an ecosystem of sort that's much broader than any one organization. So what an honor to be here with you, Kimberly, and with you, Carl. And thank you very much to the foundations and to Laura for making this happen for us today.
I mean, it's been just a really great conversation. And I just would leave you all with, I live my life one sunrise at a time, but I also know that I have a safe place to go to at night. I know that I have a car to get to my job. I know that there's a job there. I know I have a family who loves me back in Atlanta, but at least we have phone and we have FaceTime. And so those are the things that keep me grounded every day. But just imagine if you didn't have that. Just go away with thinking you don't have that. And that is what a lot of people are dealing with right now. Sure. And so if we can just all think to ourselves, okay, this is how we're going to help and this is how we're going to make change. I think we can do it all together, and it'll start with us.